When Mr. Bean's actor, Rowan Atkinson, was asked if he would ever make a movie titled Superman vs. Mr. Bean, he said no. When asked to elaborate on his answer, Atkinson famously responded, "Superman could kill Mr. Bean very easily." Now, other than the fact that this was a fake post I found on Instagram and Atkinson never actually said this, it did get me thinking. Superman is pretty much invincible. He can fly, he's got laser vision, he can rebuild the Great Wall of China just by looking at it. But he's basically a god compared to Mr. Bean, this weird little old man who is so lazy he'd rather shoot his own light bulb than get out of bed to turn it off. The reason Mr. Bean works so well is that the comedy is very physical, there's barely any language involved, so everyone from around the world can come together and laugh at him. Look at this incompetent, dim-witted character who gets scared of heights, is very socially awkward, hunts children for sport. He's a silly little guy. At least that's what he is on the surface. After extensive analysis of Mr. Bean's behaviour, I've uncovered a dark secret hiding in plain sight. Mr. Bean is not the timid fool we all know and love, but instead a being of godlike power and intelligence. By presenting my findings, I'll be able to scientifically prove that Mr. Bean could in fact kill Superman, even if you give Superman every power under the sun. Shape-shifting, time travel, infinite walls of China. It still wouldn't be enough to even lay a finger on Mr. Bean. Throughout his adventures, Mr. Bean completes a variety of near-impossible tasks without any prior knowledge or experience. This man's improvisational skills are off the chart. In the first Mr. Bean movie, he finds himself in a hospital where he's mistaken for this master surgeon in charge of a life-saving operation. Mr. Bean, of course, has no idea what's going on and takes the whole thing as a joke, making goofy faces, supercharging a defibrillator and nearly shocking himself to death, typical Mr. Bean behaviour. However, when it comes to the operation, Mr. Bean performs a miracle from out of nowhere, using his bare hands to complete the surgery by himself without breaking a sweat. This seems highly improbable, but you know what? Everyone gets lucky now and again. We'll give him the benefit of the doubt. Let's take a look at a couple more examples. In Back to School Mr. Bean, he attends a judo class, and as you can see from the colour of their belts, Mr. Bean is a complete rookie, and the instructor is an experienced fighter. Despite this, Mr. Bean still manages to get the upper hand and disposes of his opponent with ease, humiliating the guy in front of his students. Again, this seems pretty unlikely, but maybe the instructor was having an off day, It happens. I can't remember what the fuck he's doing here, but I'll leave it to your imagination. The most important part, though, is when he gets caught. Mr. Bean masterfully improvises to avoid suspicion and is thus free to continue torturing the poor man on the bathroom floor. Okay, so what do all these clips have in common? Well, in each of these scenarios, Mr. Bean is just simply imitating those around him. When he performs the operation, he's just mimicking the actual medical professionals around him. When he's at the judo class, he's mimicking the instructor's moves, albeit in his own twisted way. And when the fine gentleman arrives at the bathroom door, it's clear by looking at him that this man takes no nonsense. He's a man of order. And so Mr. Bean mimics that sense of authority and throws it back at him. One explanation could be that Mr. Bean intensely studies those around him, and he can do so in such a small amount of time that he instantly assumes their skills. This would explain how he's able to succeed in such wild situations. He's just very observant and a fast learner. But that seems like a bit of a stretch. Mr. Bean isn't exactly the most observant person. In fact, half the reason he gets into these situations is because he's so oblivious to his surroundings. He's not a fast learner, he's just an idiot. Another explanation could be that Mr. Bean has the subconscious, supernatural power to absorb the abilities of others, also known as power stealing. Users can absorb powers from others, usually temporarily, and the victims naturally regain their lost power, but some users may be able to absorb powers permanently, according to powerlisting.fandom.com. Mr. Bean is clearly not aware of this power, but it would explain how he achieves all these miracles. Like I said before, Superman has the power of flight, laser vision, eating 1 billion burgers. Superman gets in the ring with Mr. Bean. Mr. Bean gets all of those powers as well. But once again, this seems a bit far-fetched, and there's no proper evidence that superpowers in the traditional sense exist in Mr. Bean's universe. Plus, there are some instances where this theory wouldn't really work. In The Curse of Mr. Bean loses his swimming trunks in a public pool, and there's no way of getting them back. When the pool closes and everyone is ordered to get out, Mr. Bean panics and hides himself underwater until the lifeguards leave. Fortunately, no one notices him, and he manages to escape the pool. Another victory for Mr. Bean. But look at him. It's fairly fucking obvious that he's right there. Either this lifeguard is completely blind or just really shit at his job. This can't be the case though, as earlier in the same episode, the lifeguard is shown to be very observant and is quick to punish anyone who breaks the rules. Okay, so maybe it's just an inconsistency in the script, sure, but that would be a complete disservice to the writers. As well as playing Mr. Bean, Rowan Atkinson also co-writes for the show, and he's a smart guy. It seems impossible that he would let this sort of thing happen. Okay, so if it's not power stealing or bad writing, then what is it? How is he able to achieve all of these miracles? Well, After going through every episode frame by frame, I've uncovered Mr. Bean's most overpowered ability of all. You see, my theory, and it is just a theory, is that Mr. Bean is able to manipulate probability fields, the metaphysical fields of chance, or luck, harnessing good fortune for himself. This is called psychokinesis, so yes, it is dumb luck, but by his own subconscious design. While this ability itself is still rather outlandish, probability is a real concept in mathematics and physics, so it would make sense in Mr. Bean's universe. Let's say Superman and Mr. Bean are fighting. It doesn't matter where, they could be fucking space for all I care. Using his powers of good fortune, Mr. Bean would just so happen to stumble upon some kryptonite. Maybe it's that pink kryptonite that turns Superman gay. Yes, that did actually happen. Whatever the scenario, Mr. Bean would be able to manipulate events in his favour, giving him a significant advantage over Superman. However, Mr. Bean doesn't seem to be in control of his powers. I don't know how the psychokinesis is activated, but it seems to fail just as much as it succeeds, so there's no guarantee that Mr. Bean would come out on top. If Superman charged himself with solar energy, flew way up in the sky, assembled infinite walls of Chinas around Mr. Bean so he couldn't escape, there'd be a good chance that he would win. Fortunately, the psychokinesis isn't the only trick up Mr. Bean's sleeve. In Tee Off Mr. Bean is doing his laundry and accidentally gets stuck in one of the machines. While he's in there, a woman turns the machine on, Mr. Bean starts spinning around, and we don't see what happens next. Now this looks like a dryer, but the Mr. Bean channel on YouTube says that it's a washing machine. Maybe in the Mr. Bean universe people call washing machines dryers and dryers... We'll consider both options. Could you survive in a washing machine? No. Okay, so you'd either drown, be crushed into little pieces by the intense spinning, or your body would fill up with these dangerous chemicals like liquid detergent. Alternatively, if it is a dryer, you'd probably suffer from severe burns and die of asphyxiation. Now, Quora once told me that I could inject my own poo into my veins and still survive, so it's not exactly the most reliable source, but using common sense, I think it's safe to say that no human being, or anything really, could survive this without some sort of permanent damage. However, in the very next scene of the same episode, Mr. Bean appears totally fine with no sign of physical or psychological trauma. Okay, so maybe these scenes aren't in chronological order. Maybe Mr. Bean did actually die and all subsequent episodes take place before that point. It's possible, it could be like a anthology show where all the episodes air out of order, but this argument kind of falls apart when you see that Mr. Bean has physically aged since that episode. Yes, it could be like Better Call Saul, where the actor's age doesn't necessarily reflect the character's age, and you just have to sort of ignore that the actor looks a lot older. But in Better Call Saul, they still make an effort to use older technology and references to that time period. Mr. Bean, on the other hand, has interacted with newer technology, and it's kind of obvious that years, if not decades, have passed since that fateful laundry outing. And so for Mr. Bean to have survived this, his body would need to be way more durable than the average human. He would have to have invulnerability, or near enough. What's more, he would also need the ability to breathe underwater and have the resistance to heat, which I guess would come under the immortality. However, we don't know for sure how far this durability goes. His body may be durable, sure, but not unbreakable. With enough time and patience, Superman could possibly beat him. But this video's title, assuming I haven't changed it, is Mr. Bean could kill Superman. This is a fight to the death. And while Superman has killed in the comics and movies before, not counting Injustice, it's usually because he had no other choice and the victim was this super evil monster about to destroy the Earth or some shit. But Mr. Bean is just a little man, and Superman's a good guy. Having power is one thing, but having the balls to use it is another. Superman has the strength to disembowel a man in a matter of nanoseconds, but he chooses not to because he's morally inclined to do so. He values human life and will only take it if absolutely necessary. Mr. Bean, on the other hand, look what he does in his spare time. What the fuck is this? Do you think this man values human life? Mr. Bean doesn't understand how people work, nor does he want to. He's perfectly content in his own little life, getting up to his own little weird adventures. This does, however, lead to a lot of antisocial behaviour on his part, ranging from the awkward encounters to the straight-up crimes against humanity. In Mind the Baby, Mr. Bean is tasked with minding a baby after he accidentally kidnaps it from its mother. But Mr. Bean wanted to have fun at the fair, and he can't do both at the same time, right? No, which is why he leaves the baby unattended while he goes and has fun on a roller coaster. When the ride's about to start, he prevents a man from getting on, and smiles about it afterwards, because Mr. Bean takes joy in others' suffering. What's more, he displays no emotion whatsoever during the ride, and falls asleep. Eventually the baby's returned to its mother, no thanks to Psycho McGee over here. One could say that he didn't mean to kidnap this child, he tried his best to look after it. Which would be plausible if he didn't do the exact same thing in the second Mr. Bean movie. He's clearly got a knack for this. Compare this to the time when Superman was also tasked with minding a baby after accidentally kidnapping it. Yes, believe it or not, there are just so many fucking Superman comics that for every scenario Mr. Bean's in, Superman has also been in that exact same situation like 5 times. Superman takes this child, who just so happens to be a telepathic alien, and vows to keep it safe no matter what. He tries to cheer it up, he sings it a lullaby to calm it down, and takes it to a church so that it can get the proper care that it needs. Even when he's delivered the child to the right people, Superman still promises to come back and check on it just in case. When some alien warlord with a glowing nipple shows up looking for the child, Superman fights tooth and nail to protect it, flying the warlord way up into the sky and throwing him into the depths of space. It's a rather heartwarming story. Okay, key things to note, and you should really be writing this down. Superman will go to great lengths and put himself in danger for the safety of a child, and Mr. Bean kidnaps children and will actively neglect them for his own personal gain. Things get way darker in the episode Goodnight Mr. Bean, the title being rather symbolic as we're now saying goodnight to the last shred of humanity he had left. Mr. Bean is in the queue for the hospital, but he's bored, and so to speed up the wait, he comes up with some psychotic ideas. First, he throws away a child's teddy bear so that they lose their place in the queue. Not the worst thing, we've all done it at one point or another, but perhaps the worst offense is when he fucking assaults a man, blames it on the guy next to him, which causes a fight between the two men. Also, he could move up 1 space in the queue. Fortunately, when he gets near the front of the queue, the lady in front is already leaving, and thank God, because from the look on his face, I don't know what the fuck he was about to do to her. Mr. Bean gets a ticket with the number representing his place in the second queue. When he gets to the waiting room, he sees that an elderly man is about to take the last seat, so he of course takes advantage of the man's disability and takes the seat for himself. He then notices the person next to him covered in bandages. This person has 2 broken legs, at least 1 broken arm, a broken neck. We don't know what's under these bandages, but they could be a burn victim, they could have no skin. Either way, their life is painfully shit. And so of course, Mr. Bean takes the absolute piss out of them. He laughs at them, he quite literally flexes on them, saying, "Hey, I can use my neck, I can use my legs, get fucked." Once again, Mr. Bean derives joy from others' misery. He then notices that the bandaged person is a full 24 places ahead of him in the queue, and so he swaps their tickets knowing full well they can't do anything about it. And to add insult to a already staggering number of injuries, Mr. Bean sees the kid next to him's ticket and adds a 0 on the end so that the kid will miss their turn. Now this kid's number is already higher than Mr. Bean's. Mr. Bean has absolutely nothing to gain from this. On the YouTube video I was watching this scene on, the woman calls out number 23 at exactly 2 minutes and 43 seconds. She then calls out number 24 at 4 minutes and 11 seconds. That's 1 minute and 28 seconds for every number that is called. For simplicity's sake, let's call that 88 seconds. Now if we do a bit of mathematique, the kid's new number is 850. 850 take away 24 is 826. That's 826 places to wait in the queue. So that's 826 places, times by 88 seconds, account for the time dilation caused by the sheer gravity of Mr. Bean's balls. That's equal to 76,322.4 seconds. Mr. Bean has doomed this child to waiting 21 hours in the queue for no fucking reason. See that sign over there? Radiotherapy. These are people who need proper medical assistance, and Mr. Bean is preventing them from getting it. And for what? For fun. He's a menace. He's a threat to public health. A complete contrast to Superman, who frequently inconveniences his own life to help other people. Look no further than All-Star Superman by Grant Morrison and Frank Quitely. You might have heard of it, it's not like it's one of the greatest Superman stories ever told. One of my favourite panels is from issue 10, where Superman volunteers to fly a bunch of hospital kids on a tour around the world, just to make their day a little bit better. This is just one of many examples in that one story, in which he brightens people's days just for the sake of it. The last thing I want to touch on is, how would I put this? Mr. Bean's thirst for blood. Now most of us have probably experienced having a mouse or a rat in our homes that we have to get rid of. You or I would probably spray like those scent things that gets rid of them, wait for the cat to get it, or if need be, use a mouse trap. What you typically wouldn't do is wait for Christmas Day to roll around, give the mouse its own little stocking with a little bit of cheese in it, and then use that generous gift as a ploy to smash its fucking brains in. Why go to the effort of having the custom-made stocking? The mouse doesn't give a shit, it's gonna meet its maker regardless. Clearly he gets off on this sadistic creativity. So Mr. Bean likes to kill animals. You know what's worse than animals? children. Mr. Bean is trying to use one of these coin machines, the one where you put the coins on the I don't fucking know how it works. But he keeps losing, so he takes the frustration out on a little kid next to him by suffocating him and throwing him to his death. Now, there are two main things we can take away from this whole section here. Number one, Mr. Bean will cross the line that others won't. This means that he can achieve his goals much more efficiently, even if it has to put others in harm's way. Children, hospital patients, doesn't matter who dies as long as he gets what he wants. This gives him a tactical advantage over Superman, who actually values people's lives and will go out of his way to rescue them. And number two, it would appear that for every time Mr. Bean makes someone suffer, he grows more confident in his abilities. Therefore, you could say that Mr. Bean draws power from the pain that he causes. Okay, so we've got each side's abilities, we've examined their personalities, so we know how they use said abilities. We got a pretty good idea of how this fight is going to go. Okay, so where would this fight take place? It can't take place in Metropolis, because otherwise Superman would have home court advantage. He knows his way around. Same goes for Mr. Bean in London. We could put them both in a nameless arena, or a big field, or a big empty space, but that'd be kind of boring, and it would give me less to work with. So to make it completely fair, let's just choose a random place that neither of them are familiar with. New Jersey, fuck no. Brazil, fuck it, sure, they're fighting in Brazil. Okay, so Mr. Bean and Superman are in Brazil, they're about to fight, they don't get any fucking prep time, alright? Sorry, but prep time only really applies to Batman and Kevin McAllister. No, this fight will be purely on instinct. Boom, boom, go fight, see what happens. None of that prep time, alright? I don't make the rules. We've got the fight set up, but there's one important thing that we're missing. Motivation. Superman's not going to start lasering Mr. Bean's face off for no reason. He's going to need some justification for attacking him. And like I said before, Mr. Bean's happy in his own little life, so he probably finds Superman boring. They need someone to fight for, someone or something that they care about. For Superman, that's easy. He'll fight for his friends, his family, the whole planet. You know, if Mr. Bean's doing something to endanger people, and as we've established, he does that all the time, then Superman will take action. But what does Mr. Bean, the unfeeling maniac who will suffocate children and deprive cancer patients of their treatment, what does a man like that care about? Despite being a complete psychopath, there are two main things in Mr. Bean's life that he has ever shown the slightest bit of emotion towards. One is his car, as when it gets annihilated by a tank, Mr. Bean is shown to be deeply troubled by its death and on the verge of tears. The second thing is Teddy. Mr. Bean and Teddy are inseparable, they're best friends, soulmates even. Teddy is the only constant in his life who he genuinely cares for. One could argue that he also cares about his girlfriend, Irma, but looking back on it, the relationship is very one-sided and Mr. Bean spends half the time either terrorizing her or being overly possessive, so we'll leave her out of the equation for now. You could also say that he cares about the family that he stays with in the first movie, and while he does seem to like spending time with them, it's probably just a front to get a roof over his head. Anyways, Mr. Bean will do anything for Teddy, prioritizing his safety over actual humans. Mr. Bean once went on a rampage, putting dozens of innocent civilians at risk, just so Teddy could get a slightly comfier armchair. When he's about to put Teddy in the washing machine, he gives him a straw to breathe so that he doesn't drown. On Christmas Day, he gives Teddy a brand new set of eyes. This is far more care than he ever gave his poor girlfriend, by the way. If something were to happen to Teddy, Mr. Bean would do everything in his power to rescue him. Another thing to note is that, despite all of Mr. Bean's efforts, Teddy still manages to suffer an overwhelming amount of injuries. Either he's drowned in paint, torn in half, decapitated, whatever it is, he seems to take after Mr. Bean in that he'll always appear totally unharmed in the next scene. Given the severity of his injuries, Teddy must have some sort of healing factor, similar to Wolverine, and therefore can't be killed. Now that we've examined Mr. Bean's best friend, it's only fair that we do the same for Superman. His best friend is arguably Jimmy Olsen, a photographer for the Daily Planet. He looks up to Superman as a role model and a parent figure, and he's even got this special watch that will send a high-pitched frequency that only Superman can hear if he ever needs his help. Every time the DC universe is destroyed and rebooted, Superman and Jimmy always find their way back together. It's like they were destined to become best friends. Like Mr. Bean with Teddy, Superman really cares for Jimmy and would do anything to keep him out of harm's way, except for the time he forced him to marry a gorilla and stopped him getting adopted, and then adopted Jimmy himself only to make his life hell. Jimmy, this gift you got me for Father's Day makes me sorry I ever adopted you as my son. I'll have to destroy it to teach you a lesson. But Superman, I mean, Dad, what did I ever do wrong? Superman, stop this crazy test. Let us share that water or we'll die. Sorry, Jimmy. The ground rules only allow one survivor. You or Aquaman. Superman, an unknown enemy has materialized these former identities of mine and is now working a ghastly change on me. Save me. I can't, Jimmy. You're being punished by some super race for a crime against their world. What the fuck? Okay, apart from all that, Superman does actually care about him. And you know what? Jimmy can be a bit of a dick too, sometimes. He's thrown the odd insult. He's faked being in a coma to learn Superman's secret identity. He's led a regiment of alien soldiers with toy guns into a suicide charge against Superman's wishes. Jimmy, you rat! You've revealed my Clark Kent identity to these criminals for money! Now they've chained me with kryptonite! Why did you betray me? I don't know. And, like Teddy, Jimmy has also demonstrated his fair share of powers. Over the years, he's demonstrated the following abilities: super speed, super intelligence, breathing fire, turning into a gorilla, turning into a woman, becoming a genie, becoming a hippie, becoming morbidly obese, yes, that's actually listed as one of his powers, monstrous beard growth, and giant turtle man. And so to give the participants equal motivation to fight, each of their best friends will be trapped in an unbreakable cage. If Superman loses, Jimmy Olsen will be shot in the head. If Mr. Bean loses, Teddy will also be shot, but with an adamantium bullet. What's more, there won't be any moral quandaries either. Teddy's death wouldn't conflict with Superman's morals, because to him, Teddy's just an inanimate object. And Mr. Bean wouldn't care about Jimmy either way because, well, he's a fucking psycho. Okay, that's it. Time for the fight. Time to use all of the knowledge we've gathered thus far, all the rules we've established. Finally, we can see how on earth Mr. Bean would beat Superman. Forgot something. Kind of important. Changes everything. I don't know how we didn't see this coming. It's in the fucking title sequence. Every episode of Mr. Bean opens with this little segment. There's this swelling, sort of grand choir music playing as the titles roll, and it creates this ominous, almost angelic-like atmosphere which is quite far removed from the tone of the actual show. But for the longest time, it was just a weird opening. It wasn't meant to be taken literally. He probably just fell out a window or off a roof, or maybe they're going for a religious angle. Whatever the interpretation, there was never any elaboration on what this opening actually meant. Until. Now, so far I haven't mentioned the animated series. It's basically the same sort of thing as the live action stuff, with Rowan Atkinson providing the voice for Mr. Bean. While I don't think the animation really quite captures the magic of Atkinson's physical performance, the series is still quite iconic in its own right, and there are a number of really good episodes which expand on the Mr. Bean lore, if you will. In the episode Double Trouble, Mr. Bean is confused when he finds a car identical to his own. He writes it off as a coincidence until he sees the car's owner, another Mr. Bean. After convincing himself that he's not having another psychotic episode, Mr. Bean pursues his doppelganger in an intense, action-filled car chase. When he finally catches up with him, the other Mr. Bean is equally as confused. They have the same handkerchief, the same hair comb, the same underwear. The only major difference is that this other Mr. Bean doesn't have a teddy, but instead a toy penguin. And it turns out that his name isn't Mr. Bean, instead Mr. Pod. Mr. Bean and Mr. Pod become best friends and they go to Mr. Bean's house together. However, Mr. Bean is not very pleased when Mr. Pod tries to steal his girlfriend. Pod takes her away in his car and takes her to a field where there's just a fucking UFO just sitting there. We then see that the spacecraft is filled with dozens of creatures who also look like Mr. Bean. Having chased Irma and Pod to the field, Mr. Bean does not seem fazed by the fact that there are alien clones of him and is perfectly happy just ditching his life to go fly away in their spaceship. Before they take flight, however, the Mr. Bean clones kick him out of the spaceship, mirroring the live-action opening titles while playing the same angelic music. If we treat the animated series as canon to the live-action series, it does raise a number of questions. As established in the episode, these Mr. Bean clones freely roam around the same places as Mr. Bean does. So how do we know that all these live-action appearances are in fact the real Mr. Bean? And is there even such thing as a real Mr. Bean? Sure, they might have different names, but they're identical to one another. They behave the same, they drive the same car, they more or less have the same possessions. If we say Mr. Bean versus Superman, is it just one of them, or all of them? If one Mr. Bean dies, could we replace him with another one? Technically that wouldn't be him, but spiritually it would, because we don't even know who's the original. Sure, we can tell the difference based on what toy he has. If he has Teddy, then he's our guy, right? But Teddy's not in every episode of the live-action series. In fact, he's only in a rare few. So who's to say that this guy is the main Mr. Bean? Half the episodes could be following Mr. Pod, and we wouldn't know it. In this shot, I count 16 Mr. Beans. That we know about. Where do these guys come from? Is there some sort of alien factory chugging them out every second, producing Mr. Beans endlessly? Is there a planet filled with these Mr. Bean clones living peacefully on the other side of the universe in harmony? Depending on where these guys come from, there could be infinite Mr. Beans. And so, in a sense, Mr. Bean can never die. A self-sustaining cycle of incompetency, sociopathic behaviour, and infinite armchair vehicular killing machines, Superman may be physically invulnerable, but conceptually, far from it. He's just one man, and men can be beaten. But Mr. Bean is more than just a man. He's an idea. And you can't kill an idea. Hello to the people who've just skipped to this point in the video. I guess the chapter titles are there for a reason, but fuck yourself. Two beings of ungodly power prepare to fight to the death. Only one will survive. Teddy and Jimmy are placed within eyeshot of the fight, trapped in their unbreakable cage. Their lives hang in the balance. 3, 2, 1. Stop, says Superman. Now, as we've established, Superman will only kill if absolutely necessary, and so he wants to find another way. Listen, I know I might look like some unfeeling god who thinks they're above everyone, but I was raised here on Earth, just like you. I know we're both in the same boat right now, so if we can get to understand one another, maybe we can work together and put a stop to whoever's behind this. Unfortunately, Mr. Bean is oblivious to Superman's words, and is more just confused as to how he got here. By now, a reasonably large crowd has built up. Onlookers are curious as to why these two godly beings are fighting in Brazil of all places. Mr. Bean begins to feel intimidated by the crowd and starts to panic. Unsure what Mr. Bean will do if he loses control, Superman spawns in a Great Wall of China, blocking the crowd's view. Meanwhile, an escape is attempted. While Teddy has accepted his fate, Jimmy is determined to break his way out. If there's anything Superman has taught him, it's that you can always find a way. Nothing. The cage is fireproof. But Jimmy doesn't give up that easily, and he's got plenty of other powers. Naturally, he activates his powers of extreme obesity. No luck. Not only has this attempt failed, Jimmy now can't seem to turn back, and is stuck with his face pressed up against the cage. The seismic waves caused by the Wall of China has significantly weakened nearby surfaces, and the increased weight in the cage has caused the ground underneath to crumble. Suddenly, the cage falls down into the sewer below, flipping it upside down and covering it in a mountain of rubble. Not good. Back to Superman and Mr. Bean. Or should I say just Superman, because Mr. Bean is now missing. Superman scans his surroundings for any sign of his opponent, but to no avail. That's weird, he's not picking up on anything with his super hearing, nor does he— Superman falls down, clutching his chest in agony. You see, while Mr. Bean was underwater, he stumbled across some kryptonite and used it to fashion a makeshift spear. Pair this with Mr. Bean's sporadic, violent outbursts, and you've got yourself a Kryptonian killing machine. Significantly weakened, it appears Superman is done for. But he feels strange. It's not just the pain, it's something he's never felt before. It's almost like he—
Hey, are you alright down there?
A concerned Brazilian citizen has spotted Jimmy's leg poking out from the rubble.
Hey, I think there's a guy stuck in the sewer!
Most people are still focused on the Superman and Mr. Bean fight, but a small, curious crowd has built up around the hole. Some people start taking pictures and sharing them around on social media. What are you doing? Can't you see this man needs help? He's probably dead anyway. Yeah, let's have our fun, man. Hey, did you hear about that space fish? The what? There's this new species of fish that swims around space. I saw it on Nat Geographic. How is this relevant? Just then, a man steps forward.
Hey, my name is Matteo. I live just across the road from here with my beautiful wife and 2 kids. Everyone get out of the way. That man needs my help.
Matteo's plan is simple. He will lower himself down the hole, clear the rubble, and use a rope to haul them back up. It's foolproof. Matteo's wife tries to stop him, asking him to think of the kids. If something happens to him while he's in the sewer, his children will grow up without a father.
Oh no, I have loved you for 25 years, but not once in those 25 years have I ever backed down from doing the right thing.
The clock is ticking. While Teddy is immune to all damage, Jimmy does not have such a luxury. All of the blood rushing to his head has caused severe intracranial pressure, and in 20 minutes he will be dead. And so Matteo is lowered into the sewer, armed with only a rope and his pride.
Don't you worry, my friend. I'm gonna get you out of there.
Thanks to all of the photos on social media, the mysterious leg in the sewer has become an international news story, attracting the attention of people all across the world, including the Brazilian government. You see, back in 2017, the government had closed off a number of sewers in the city, as most of the sewage had been rerouted to a brand new treatment plant. This treatment plant was called Ouriço Verde, which literally translates to the green boner. This is true, look it up. But since then, they've been using the empty sewers to store various government projects, including nuclear weapons. The government decides that they can't risk the Brazilian public finding out about these weapons, and so they dispatch a spy to shut down the rescue attempt. Meanwhile, back to whatever Superman and Mr. Bean are doing, Mr. Bean has got bored of the fight and is now rampaging through the city on his trusty armchair vehicle. Superman, still recovering from his wound, chases Mr. Bean through the city, as various civilians are mowed down. Superman stops to make sure every civilian is okay, but this gives Mr. Bean a massive advantage. For every civilian Superman checks on, another 5 more are run down. That's it, Superman has had enough. It's clear that Mr. Bean has no regard for human life, and all that matters now is taking him out. Superman races forward, grabs Mr. Bean and throws him into the depths of space, but Mr. Bean activates his psychokinesis and bounces off a conveniently positioned rock orbiting Earth, hurtling back towards Superman. The two spin around, fighting to the death, but there it is again, that strange feeling. It's not pain, it's more closer to jealousy, or lust. Wait, you're not colorblind, are you? Yeah, why? Because I don't think that was green kryptonite. What do you mean?
You're looking fine, babe.
Mateo has cleared most of the rubble from on top of the cage, his hands covered in cuts and bruises. Jimmy has now passed out, but rescue is imminent, as Mateo ties the rope around the top of the cage and tells everyone to pull as hard as they can. Just as they're making some progress, the government spy pulls out a knife and slashes the rope. Why? Asks Superman. Why are people so keen to see us fight? Is it merely just an extension of one's own anger and insecurity? Does directing one's pain towards a trivial fight between two fictional characters distract oneself from the cruelty and pain of one's own suffering? What? I think the world would be a much better place if we just learned to be patient with one another, to not jump to the extremities and judgments, and instead realize that most conflict between different groups is specifically engineered to distract us from the real societal problems. The two godlike beings float in silence, reflecting on their newfound approach to life. Meanwhile, a second rope is lowered into the sewer. Mateo's wife goes down after him, trying to break him free, but Mateo refuses. He insists that the main priority is still Jimmy, and tells her to get him out first. Touched by her husband's selfless act, Anna ties the second rope to the cage, and the crowd pulls once more. It's difficult at first, but the group is driven by this sense of resilience and community and defiance against the government, and they pull the damn rope as hard as they can. We're doing it! We're fucking doing it! Can I tell you something? Yeah, go ahead. All my life, I've never had a job. I've never had a lot of friends. I've always felt like an outsider, a spectator to society, rather than a participant. For a long time I thought I was okay with this, because I was content with who I was. But then I discovered that I belonged to an infinite race of identical beings. I tried to play it off, like I was totally cool with it, but in reality I've never been more terrified. Is everything I am, or ever will be, simply programmed into me? Everything that I thought made me special, made me unique? Does that mean nothing anymore? You know, the aliens were more of a wake-up call, because for all of my life I've never truly been allowed to be myself. I've always stayed true to who I am, and everyone has laughed at me. My life is nothing but a joke. Even now, I bet my sincerity will be cut off by some clever bit that makes me look like some incompetent fool. Do you know what that does to my sense of self-worth? My sense of identity? I've never lived for other people. I've always put myself first in every situation. But if I'm now starting to doubt myself, if I have no grasp on who I am or why I am, then what is there to live for? What am I to do? Oh shit. Once again, hello to all the people who skipped to this point. Fuck yourself. Now that we've scientifically proven that Mr. Bean could in fact kill Superman, why stop there? And so I asked my wonderful audience, which other characters could Mr. Bean take in a fight? And so I've handpicked the best answers and we're going to debate them. Okay, let's begin with Goku. It's a question as old as time. If you claim a certain character to be powerful, there'll always be that one person in the back asking, can they beat Goku though? In case you haven't watched Dragon Ball, Goku is immensely powerful. He's one of the most powerful beings in the multiverse. His power level has reached 150 million, whatever the fuck that means. So how can Mr. Bean defeat a being of such indomitable strength? Well, Goku does have a couple weaknesses. First, he's rather naive, so it's quite easy to catch him off guard. He's also got a severe phobia of needles, but this was only really added in the anime and never mentioned in the original manga, so I'm not sure if it counts. What some people overlook, however, is his vulnerability to laxatives. In the episode Goku vs. Sky Dragon, Goku is betrayed by one of his friends, who spikes his food with laxatives. This gives Goku severe stomach problems during one of his battles, and he gets the shit kicked out of him. Funnily enough, in the first Mr. Bean movie, Mr. Bean makes use of laxatives during a heist, spiking a security guard's coffee with a lethal dose of them. If Mr. Bean could just catch Goku off guard, feed him laxatives by any means necessary, then Goku would just shit himself to death. Another victory for the Bean. Wario. Wario is Mario's arch nemesis, appearing in lots of different Super Mario games and his own titles as well, such as Wario Land, Wario's Woods, WarioWare Smooth Moves, and Wario Master of Disguise. You might know him from his famous catchphrase, "It's-a me, Wario." But don't let his charming appearance deceive you, for Wario wields superhuman strength and can even cause small earthquakes. He can also charge up his farts, which are so powerful they create a nuclear explosion. What's more, in the game manual for Wario Land 2, Wario states that he is immortal. This is simply because he just doesn't feel like dying. However, Wario's intelligence is not on par with his level of strength, which means he is easily tricked by others. He is easily influenced by money or getting revenge against Mario, so much so that he'll turn a blind eye to common sense and self-preservation. Mr. Bean could just convince Wario that he does want to die, thus removing his immortality, and Wario's rage makes him very oblivious to his surroundings, so Mr. Bean could easily sneak up on him and take him out. Popeye. Popeye's another one of these characters protected by cartoon logic. He eats a can of spinach and suddenly he's immortal. He can move at near light speed, flying to the moon in under 2 seconds. It seems like Mr. Bean has met his match. Unfortunately for Popeye, his weakness comes from the reliance on the very thing that gives him power. Mr. Bean would just have to eat all of the spinach in the world, thus depriving Popeye of his power source. Now don't get me wrong, this is a near impossible task that would take years to accomplish, but as we've seen before, Mr. Bean will go to great lengths to accomplish his goals, and he has the power of luck on his side. After that, Mr. Bean could probably just take him out with a gun. LeBron James. So LeBron James is considered one of the greatest basketball players of all time. He's in the top tier of athletes in the world, but the Olympics is a competition consisting of the greatest athletes in the world. Mr. Bean famously won the Olympics in London 2012. LeBron James has never won the Olympics. Mr. Bean wins. Someone said the rat from Avengers Endgame. If you're one of the 2 people who haven't seen Avengers Endgame, a random rat steps on the button which releases Ant-Man from the quantum realm, who in turn provides the necessary knowledge for the Avengers to beat Thanos, thus resurrecting half the universe. But despite the rat indirectly saving trillions of people, Mr. Bean would still eviscerate it without a second thought. Now this looks like a common brown rat, or Rattus norvegicus for the taxonomists out there, so there's nothing remotely special about it. And, as shown before, Mr. Bean takes a particular liking to killing rodents, so he'd likely come up with some twisted saw trap maze for the rat to crawl around. Manny Heffley, for fuck's sake. Manny is the younger brother of the main character Greg Heffley in the book / actually fucking masterpiece of a movie series, Diary of a Wimpy Kid. Manny is an annoying little shit, and words cannot describe the collective hatred everyone who knows this series feels towards him. However, like Mr. Bean, Manny also pulls a series of complete miracles from out of nowhere, leading people to believe he's some being of godlike intelligence. Manny is only 3 years old and yet can build an entire house on his own. He can speak fluent Spanish out of nowhere, he's a genius entrepreneur, but like Manny, Mr. Bean is also a master architect. He's pretty much created his own version of English, which should really be considered its own language at this point. One only needs to watch a single Mr. Bean episode to see that his intelligence is at least equal to Manny's. Also, Manny is a kid, and as we've established before, Mr. Bean is he's quite good at defeating kids in close combat. Mr. Bean wins, even if he wouldn't actually have fucking won. I just fucking hate Manny so much. Mr. Bean versus 1 billion lions. Now here's the thing, I'm very passionate about any sort of question like this that involves lions. My favourite thing to ask people is, who would win, an infinite number of lions or the sun? The correct answer is the lions, obviously, because while the lions would keep burning up in the sun, they will just outlive the sun. They're infinite. Sun's gonna explode in 5 billion years. The lions have got all the time in the world. Ooh, but Wouldn't the hydrogen atoms inside the lions keep fueling the sun so that it keeps getting more powerful and therefore would actually never die? Yeah, but the lions are infinite and would therefore outlive the death of the universe, including the sun. In fact, the lions would keep going beyond that, illogically existing in the infinite nothingness of the dead universe. Okay, so let's change the question to Mr. Bean versus infinite lions, because that's more interesting. As established, the lions can win against anything, because they're infinite. They're just that fucking awesome. But as we've also established, Mr. Bean is just as infinite as the lions. And so what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object? They surrender. No winner. SCP-3812, oh god, what the fuck is this? SCP is a fictional universe, but not in the traditional sense that it's created by one or a few people, but instead, anyone can add to it. It's a collaborative writing project, reporting on creepy phenomena, and because it's written by so many people, the narrative is really just what you choose to believe. In this case, SCP-3812 is a mysterious entity of incalculable power, capable of altering reality. Now, the way that it works, or the way I understand it at least, is that 3812 can transcend stacked universes. To explain what this means, let's take the Mr. Bean show. First we have our universe, the real world in which you're watching this YouTube video. Then we have the Mr. Bean universe. This universe is placed under our own because to us, it's fiction. Our universe controls the narrative of Mr. Bean's universe. Then let's say Mr. Bean has a show that he likes to watch. That show is a fictional universe within the Mr. Bean universe, so it's placed under it. And then maybe the people in that universe also watch their favourite show and then it keeps going infinitely and infinitely. But how do we know that our universe is at the top? Sure, from our point of view, we're real, but from Mr. Bean's point of view, he's real too. So maybe we are a fictional universe that is below another universe, and so on, going infinitely in the other direction. 3812 can move between these narratives, bend them to its will, and destroy them. Let's say it's fighting Mr. Bean in his universe. Oh, suddenly Mr. Bean is fiction and 3812 is instantly more powerful. It can then travel up the infinite ladder of stacked universes, so if it's fighting God, then it can just ascend to a narrative higher than God. It's a very broken power and very fucking annoying, actually. If you're debating any fight in which it's involved, it can just go up another level, and it wins automatically. It's like that kid in school that, if you were play fighting and you'd hit him with a sword, then he'd say, oh, I have anti-sword armor. If you pour lava on him, then he goes, oh, I have anti-lava armor. And then you just start bashing his fucking skull in. Okay, so how in the flying hell would Mr. Bean beat such a being if it can supposedly surpass all of fiction? Well, that's just it. Its original author stated on Twitter that 3812 is just a piece of fiction, and canonically it's however strong or weak as you want it to be, because at the end of the day, SCP, like any writing or form of art, is whatever you choose to believe. So let me just add an entry to the SCP wiki. My own character, SCP-081276, that's my birthday. In the description, let's put Mr. Bean, and in abilities, let's write can beat SCP-3812. How easy was that? Mr. Bean beats Superman and all of these other characters because I say he can. After an artist puts their art out into the world, it no longer belongs to just them anymore. It's whatever you choose to interpret and how it impacts you. Mr. Bean is powerful, not because of his raw, untapped strength, but because of the impact he's had on others. He's inspired parents to keep their children close. He's inspired hospitals to improve their waiting times. He's a role model to you and I that maybe we don't have to care about what people think as much. We can do what makes us truly happy. Everyone else be damned. Ultimately, Mr. Bean is art. You are art, and I hope you enjoyed this example of why people shouldn't have this much free time.